Hey, how's it going, Summoners? This patch is pretty crazy, and let's kinda get real here. My name is Nathan Ng, and I'll be your host as we try to sort through all the chaos of patch 11.21. In this update, I'll follow up on some changes from the very beginning of the patch and also provide you with some updated tier lists for all 5 roles. Make sure you hit that sub button so you don't miss out on other content like this, and let's hop into the video. We'll go ahead and begin with the top lane. Coincidentally, this is where all the biggest changes occurred as a result of the system nerfs to both Conqueror and Gore Drinker. All in all, champions who were not hit by these nerfs ended up comparatively stronger and have seen massive increases in their win rates. That said, the top lane will be the most comprehensive in terms of the mid-patch update. There were 3 champions who received direct changes as well, so let's talk about those first. Quinn received a nerf this patch for W's bonus attack speed, but just like our analysts predicted, it didn't have much of an effect on her. Considering that the vast majority of other top laners were nerfed, it's no surprise that a nerf of her own would still result in a net neutral shift of power. Ultimately, the loss of attack speed later into the game isn't a deal breaker, and she still remains in the S tier. Sion is next, and high elo Sion's win rate has finally broken the 50% mark, and because of his massive buff to his W, he's taken a massive W on his own this patch. His win rate increased by over 1.5% because of this simple but effective buff. He's so much stronger in lane by the sheer fact that he blocks more damage and can more consistently activate his shield's explosion. And don't forget about his passive, which wasn't changed but is always really fun, you know? It's kind of to die for. Anyway, the biggest buff in the top lane was to Teemo this patch. Oh man, I hate that guy, but sometimes the truth hurts. He's pretty good right now. Honestly, maybe Teemo hit Riot with the blinding dart himself because, I mean, why? He's popping off and currently holds a 51% win rate in high elo, a massive increase since earlier this season. His win rate was hovering between 47 and 48%. The increased blind duration, decreased cooldown, and buff tilt factor, yes, I promise those were in the patch notes, make him a much more reliable pick. As he's only able to blind a single target, Riot has made sure that Teemo's main form of crowd control hits hard this patch. I mean, he can almost take out a single target of a fight with repeated casts of his Q. It's because of this that I must begrudgingly move Teemo into the OP tier. His ban rate has skyrocketed this patch as well, breaking 10% in high elo. I'm certain Teemo was designed to be annoying, but if you're unhappy to hear this, just know that whoever designed him did an excellent job of it. Moving on to the other shifts, Nasus is also in the OP tier right now. While he's above average in high elo, the fact stands that he's way too good in low and mid elo at the moment. By virtue of Nasus doing literally nothing, he has won the top lane war. The massive system nerfs to top laners has increased the damage output, meaning it's easier for him to farm up and eventually become a one-shotting monster. As a result of the nerfs, a ton of top laners ended up weaker this patch, but the 2 most affected were Riven and Renekton. Riven's win rate has plummeted this patch, and Renekton has sunk even deeper towards the rock bottom. Riven is down to the B tier this patch, while Renekton, who was pushing so hard to get back into the B tier, is now stuck in the C tier until he receives a buff, or I guess under the C, because rock bottom. Anyway, in the OB tier, we have Camille, Nasus, and Teemo, followed up by Aurelia, Mordekaiser, Tahm Kench, Jax, Malphite, Shen, Mundo, Sett, Singed, Quinn, Aatrox, Poppy, Darius, Fiora, and Graves in the S tier. Graves has made his way up to the top lane meta this patch because of the system nerfs. By the way, if the big changes this patch have left you lost, I suggest you check out one of our coaches at ProGuides.com. They're great and have helped hundreds of players rank up in the last month. Aside from coaching, they're obviously solid players and can clear any confusion that you might have. Next, let's talk about the jungle. The 2 champions who received changes this patch in the jungle were Graves and Viego. Starting with Graves, I'll keep it sweet and simple. His armor was reduced, and while he's objectively weaker than before, he's still OP. Now, let's talk about Viego, who received more comprehensive changes. He's made big strides this patch, with his win rate going up 2% after the buffs to his Q, reduced self-slow on his W, and increased the ultimate damage. At the moment, players still opt to build him like a bruiser. The Assassin Viego fantasy has yet been realized. In spite of this, the buffs to his Q and W have massively increased Viego's win rate by a sheer virtue of increased mobility and damage. According to data our analysts have looked through, there are a few players out there building crit, and they're finding a ridiculous amount of success with him. If you're curious, go ahead and try building Shield Bow, Essence Reaver, and Infinity Edge as your first 3 items. With the massive buffs that he's received, there's plenty of potential for crit builds. The system changes also had some impact in the jungle as well. Overall, physical damage champions are a little bit weaker than before, leaving much more room for AP ones to thrive. As expected, Elise popped off this patch and retains her spot in the OP tier. Another AP champion who's finding more wins is Evelynn. Because of the nerfs, she has a much easier time fighting AD champions in the mid game and can more consistently outscale them as well. Jarvan has been moved down to the A tier after the nerfs. They've impacted him enough to finally move him down. One AD champion that benefited from this patch was Kha'Zix. With bruisers and champions who prefer longer fights quicker than before, a champion like Kha'Zix who thrives off of burst damage is in a much better spot. His win rate is up 53% in high elo, so definitely don't sleep on him. Our OP picks are Graves, Elise, and Kha'Zix, followed up by Fiddlesticks, Zac, Kindred, Kayn, Nocturne, Jinzhao, Amumu, Lilia, Echo, Talia, Shaco, Talon, Jarvan, Lee Sin, and Evelynn in the S tier. And that's it for the jungle, so let's go ahead and go to the mid lane next. The mid lane had one single nerf, and that was for Akshan. As expected, he remains an S tier pick even after it. While his burst damage and kill pressure are lower than before, he's still a powerful and aggressive pick that players must respect. One big adjustment to the tier list this patch is that Yasuo is back up to the OP tier. While he's hovered close to it, he's finally breaking through, which is quite surprising. A lot of champions who can directly counter Yasuo were nerfed harder than him, making it a little bit easier to blind pick him. While he does deal less damage in the late game, so do a lot of other champions. It's not uncommon for Yasuo to end up on the side lane to split push, and because of the huge nerfs to Gore Drinker, Yasuo is better equipped to win 1v1 duels. Right in time for his skin. Very, very convenient, Riot. One final change to the mid lane is that Lux is up to the S tier. She received a solid number of changes this patch, including extra damage and a shorter ultimate cooldown early on. Gaining access to her ultimate earlier in the mid lane, Lux is free to throw it out after any Q that she lands for the sheer amount of poke damage. This applies a ton of pressure on her opponents, and as a result, Lux is able to farm up, find kills more consistently, and also put enemies further behind than before. Since Lux is in a pretty good spot right now, she's able to thrive in solo queue because of her kit. A single bind can win her team the game and also provide great utility. Catching out opponents is one of the most common ways to win games. The numbers advantage alone can lead to Baron Nashor or game-ending pushes. That being said, let me ask you our question of the day. Do you think Dragon and Baron Nashor are too strong? I personally do. League often feels like it's won or lost by whoever's team has someone that gets picked off. This leads to a lost Baron or Dragon, which snowballs into the game ending. Let me know your answers in the comments down below, and let's finish up this section. In the mid lane, our OP picks are Zed, Vex, and Yasuo, followed up by Sylas, Talon, Annie, Kiana, Diana, Ahri, Yone, LeBlanc, Kassadin, Anivia, Katarina, Fizz, Akshan, Lux, and Graves in the S tier. That wraps up this section, so let's go ahead and talk about the bot lane next. The bottom lane saw a variety of balance changes this patch. Miss Fortune is the first, and she was the main target of the patch's bot lane changes. The queen of last patch, she continues to hold her seat on the throne since her nerfs only targeted mana costs. While there is definitely less freedom to spam her W and other abilities, Miss Fortune still has enough high damage output in the early game as well as great teamfighting presence. Thus, she remains OP in this patch. Bottom lane Karthus also received a mana nerf, but he's still doing pretty well. So far, his win rate has dropped a little bit less than 1%, and our analysts will do their best to monitor his performance in spite of his new low play rate. Jinx received a huge buff to her passive as well as some decent one to her other abilities. Her win rate is up by 0.5% this patch and sitting just short of 51%. We'll leave her in the S tier for now. Jinx's explosive gameplay makes her a great fit for solo queue. Reset mechanics generally reward players heavily in disorganized play. Finally, Xayah received one more set of massive changes. This time for sure, she's finally in a good spot. After countless buffs, Xayah is finally past the 50% win rate mark, and it may finally be time to celebrate. If you're a Xayah main, your perseverance has finally paid off. With how short her Q's cooldown is now, she's definitely usable. Xayah's unique playstyle revolving around her safety and tricky crowd control creates plenty of opportunities to outplay opponents, which is good in solo queue, right? While you can't stop your teammates from randomly running it down, at least this champion brings a decent amount of tools to work with. Our analysts are comfortable with the tier list from the start of the patch, so it remains the same in our update. In the OP tier, we have Miss Fortune and Vayne, followed up by Ashe, Ezreal, Jhin, Samira, Ziggs, Lucian, Karthus, and Jinx in the S tier. Finally, we'll conclude with the supports. The one support buff was for Lux. As we mentioned earlier, she popped off in the mid lane, and the results have transferred over to the bot lane as well. With the sheer quantity of buffs that she received, it's no surprise that she's finding a ton of success. Her high elo win rate is close to 51% win rate, while overall, she's comfortably past it. Lux's poke proves to be oppressive, and if the game goes long enough, she eventually becomes just as effective as mid lane Lux at making picks and one-shotting her opponents. Lux is up to the S tier this patch. The final change that we made to the tier list is that Nami is up to the OP tier with Soraka moving down to the S tier. For the past two patches, she's been the most popular support pick by far. Sure, she's not single-handedly winning games, but Nami is a consistent pick, as well as an enabler for Lucian. As a duo, these two are oppressive, and it's nearly impossible to contest the laning phase against them. Giving up that much pressure in the bottom lane early on is a huge detriment, especially in high elo where junglers capitalize on this. They can take early dragons and also play around their stronger bot lane. In the OP tier, we have Blitzcrank, Amumu, and Nami, followed up by Thresh, Morgana, Maokai, Zara, Yumi, Lulu, Sona, Leona, Lux, and Soraka in the S tier. And that concludes our mid-patch update, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and feel free to join our Discord. You can find the link in the description, and I'd love to see you guys there. Until next time, best of luck in your games, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.